I'm Lori from Lori's Country Cottage, and I'm going to show you how to make this bedside organizer on our How Tuesday. So stay tuned. So let's get started with our bedside pockets organizer. These are the pieces that you will require. So you need to start, I suggest you cut off 5 2.5-inch strips for your binding, 2 rectangles, 16 by 41 inches of soft and stable, as well as the front and back of your organizer. And then 2 rectangles for the smaller side pockets is what I did. There's 5 total pockets. So I've got 2 10 by 9.5, 1 10 by 14.5, and 1 10 by 14.75 inch piece. Those are for the pocket fronts. Now you need a long piece, 61 inches of the back of the pockets. So this will be on the inside. And so I've got a strip there ready to be pieced because the fabric's only 45 inches wide. And the soft and stable is only 58 inches wide. So I will need to piece that, and I'll show you how to do that to make it long enough. So the instructions will be in a download off our website, and so you don't need to write down all these measurements. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the how to piece my soft and stable piece so that it is long enough. And I'm going to use my 1/4-inch foot the majority of the time. My 1/4-inch foot has a little hole in it. Can you see that? So I want to do a zigzag stitch, so I want to be sure that I'm not using that one. See how this one has a big opening in there? That is to accommodate the needle going back and forth. So we'll get the machine set up to a wide zigzag, and I'll show you how to sew it. So I've got my machine set to a wide zigzag. And I'm just going to make the stitch length a little bit wider apart or longer. And I just want to butt the 2 pieces together and zigzag it together. Now from this piece, I will be able to cut my 61-inch piece. So the first thing I want to do is set my machine for a long straight stitch and baste around the 41-inch piece of the organizer back. I will flip it then and do the same thing to the front. And so I'm going to baste all the way around just to hold it. So I'll take that to my machine, and I'll come back when it's done. Okay, so I have basted around the 61-inch piece by 10 and the 14.5 by 41. Now I basted this side and this side, so they're both covered. This one is for your pocket back, and it only needs the back covered. The front will be stitched on, quilt as you go. So next I'll show you how to do that, and then I'll take it to my machine. So now I've laid out my pocket back with the fabric basted to the back. This is the order my pockets are going to go, and that's my last pocket. So I want to line that up with the edge again, and I'm going to put my next pocket on and butt it right up here, and I'm going to stitch this. And then I'll press it open. This will be a quilt as you go to get the rest of it finished. So I'll show you what happens next. I'll bring that to my machine and I'll show you then how it's done. So I've got a close-up here of my presser foot, and on the back of the presser foot there is a hole back here. That hole is for this bar, and this bar can be put in there. There's a screw here you loosen off, and you put that in that hole and measure for your quilting. So I want to quilt every 1 inch. So I am going to put that mark at the 1 inch mark, and then I'll follow along in with the groove. So I'll show you how that's done. So I've tightened that screw up, and it's holding that little arm at 1 inch from my needle. I'll use that as my guide for my quilt as I go. So first I'm going to roll this up into my sewing machine bed, and I'm going to stitch close by the seam to hold that seam nice and flat. Now from then, I'm going to stitch every 1 inch using my guide. I can put my guide down. I think I need to tighten it a little bit more. Put my guide down right on the stitching line, and I know now my needle is 1 inch away from there. So I can continue stitching and get this all quilted. When I've got both pieces all quilted, I'll add the other one again to the end, a flip and sew, and I'll stitch close by the seam, and then every 1 inch after that. So I'll continue doing this, and I'll get back to you when I've got that done. Once you've added all your pieces, pocket pieces to the front, and quilted through them all, you want to bind the top edge. So you want to take 2 strips of binding, sew them together so it's long enough to do the entire top edge. So to make your binding piece, you want to sew it on a bias angle and stitch from this corner to this corner. When you open that up, you've got a nice 45-degree angle. Then you want to clip that off and press it open. Okay, so then you want to put that on the top edge of your pocket piece. So the piece that you have just done all the quilting on, you want to put this on the top edge of that. And so I just fold it straight in half and line it up with the raw edge, and you want to stitch on here at 1/4 inch. So I've pulled my binding to the back, to the folded edge, to the back, and I pinned all the way along here in the ditch, and check to see that I've caught the back. Some people have wonderful luck doing this. I generally don't, and I do my binding by hand on the back. But this is the inside of the pocket, and so I'm going to do it this way, and I'm wishing for the best. I'm going to finish this up and I'll show you the next step. So my binding is all sewn along the top edge, and just be extra careful if you've got a directional print like I do. Make sure all your directions are going the same way and your binding is on the top. Now this is the back of my organizer. I have basted around it. It has both edges on, both fabrics on both sides, and I have marked it at these marks: 10.5, 5, 10, 5, and 10.5. That's the width of the pockets. So I've marked it, and don't be afraid to mark it with a Sharpie, because this will be inside your pocket. So mark it so that you can see it. So I've got the binding on the whole top edge of my pockets, and I want to line the edge of this up. Oh yeah, and my binding didn't turn out too bad on the back side. So I'm going to line this up with the edge here and pin that in place with the bottom edge and with the side edge. And then each of the marks that I made on the backing piece is where each of the pockets end up. And so you want to pin and pin where each of the pockets line up. Okay, I'm going to take that to the sewing machine and I'm going to baste the two edges, and then I'm going to sew right in the ditch here on each of these. So I'll take that to my sewing machine and I'll be back. So I've basted the outer edges of both ends of my pocket flaps 1/8 of an inch from the end of the back, or from the edge, attaching the pocket to the back. And now I'm going to stitch through the center here through the ditch to sew my pockets on to my back. And so I'm going to start, and I'm going to back stitch. To make sure it's nice and strong. And then I'm going to come forward and stitch right in the ditch between the two pocket fabrics. And I'm going to back stitch at the bottom. And I'm going to continue doing that for the rest of the pockets. Now I'll finish that up and I'll show you what's next. Okay, I've got my pockets seams sewn in, and I basted this edge. And so now what I want to do is make some pleats. Now my quilting is about 1 inch apart, so I can use that as my guide. Here I don't want to get too close to the edge because I want to make sure I've got a bit of room here for my binding. And so I fold and make about 1 inch pleat. And then I do the same thing here. And I want my pleats to match up right on the seam. The same thing here. Oh, it doesn't have to be exact, but pretty close. If you use the seam lines as much as possible, the soft and stable folds the nicest. So I am going to take that to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch across all of those to hold them. So now I've lined up the folded edge away, so the raw edge of my binding against the edge of the pocket organizer, and you leave yourself about a 9-inch tail at the other end. You want to stop or start in a spot kind of partway through the strip or through the piece so that you're not fighting with a corner when you need to finish the end. So you sew this on at 1/4 inch. And because we stitched the rest at 1/8, we should have no problem with our other seams showing through. Okay, when I get 1/4 inch from the end, I need to stop and I turn my piece and I back up. I back right off and I want to turn this so that the fold here is at a 90 from the edge here, and this is even with the edge, just a titch tighter. Okay, then I come back on and I want to back stitch again and go forward. And you want to continue doing that all the way around your pocket. I will show you when I get to the end how to finish that end. When you want to finish your binding, you want to leave yourself about 9 inches in here, so you've got plenty of room to work. And more often than not, I have to rip back a little bit because I haven't left myself enough room. So you want to cut this one off straight, and then this one you're going to want to cut so whatever the width of your binding is how far this needs to extend. So I've already cut this, but you can measure. My binding's 2 1/4, so I'm going to measure 2 1/4, overlap here, and then cut this off. The other thing you can do is the piece that I've cut off the other end, I can lay on here, and I want that to line up with the piece underneath, and then I'm going to cut this top one at that point. So that's my same width. Okay, I've got my 2 ends here, and so now what I want to do is pin them, match up the corners, and I'm going to pin from here and line this edge up and pin it here. And then when I stitch that, I'll be able to just finish putting my binding on. So there's not a lot left to do. One thing that you need to do is attach your shelf liner to the back of your organizer. So you're going to stitch it on here with the right side edge here, with the edge right to the edge, I mean. Edge is matching, and you're going to stitch it at a little less than 1/4 inch. And then when your binding comes around the back, it will cover that, and you can top stitch it in here. Now I had no problem or little problem doing the machine binding, flipping this around and stitching in the ditch on the top, but the bottom was a little bit more difficult because of the extra batting in there. You could trim that away, but there's not a lot there to trim because you're only using 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you might want to do the bottom part by hand and the top by machine. It's up to you. So I'm just going to show you on my finished one where I've got the contact, the shelf liner in there. And the shelf liner comes this width, whatever this is, 16 inches-ish, and it's 50 inches long. So I just cut it a little bit shorter so that it doesn't be in my binding on both ends. And then I left this because this is all going to stick under the mattress on your bed to hold your organizer in securely. So you've got a little bit of space here that you can either pull that up under the mattress to the length that you want. So these are in the right position. Now I pressed these a little bit, so they just flattened up a little bit, whereas this one has not been pressed. It's up to you, but I like them just a little bit flatter. Thanks everyone for watching How Tuesday at Lori's Country Cottage and making a bed organizer. I'm Lori. Have a great day.